After all of the demonization of health reform over the past year, after Republicans used health reform as a cudgel to beat Democrats over the head with during the election, after Republicans convinced conservative Democrats to vote against health reform or even to campaign against health reform, after all of that, today, when it came down to it, when Republicans finally had their big test vote on repealing health reform, their marquee issue, they got precisely 4 Democratic votes. 181 Democrats voted not to repeal health reform, and 4 voted with the Republicans. 4. That's roughly the number of party crossovers you could expect to defect from a vote on whether or not today really is Friday. They got 4 votes. That's it. And that includes one Democrat who says that's the last vote Republicans will get from him on this issue. When it comes to actually voting for repeal, he is not with them. So that means there are a grand total of 3 Democrats in the entire House, out of hundreds of members of the House, who are willing to side with Republicans on repealing health reform. That's it. Even Democrats who not only voted against health reform originally, but are still against health reform. Even Democrats who are willing to go on Fox News to talk about how much they hate health reform, even those Democrats can tell it is a bad idea to vote to repeal it.
To repeal it all, including the few provisions that were beneficial, just doesn't make any sense.
Democratic Congressman Jason Altmaier, not a progressive leader. Jason Altmaier, eager for any opportunity to vote against his own party on anything. Jason Altmaier is not taking this one up. He voted no on health reform, but he's not voting to repeal it. It is amazing news for Democrats that Republicans have decided that this is the hill they want to die on in Washington. This is the first thing they want to do. What they want to broadcast to America about them being in charge is that their first priority is to add $230 billion to the deficit. To be clear, this means they want to make the deficit $230 billion worse. What do they propose to get for adding $230 billion to the deficit? They propose to get 32 million Americans losing their health insurance. Well, who wouldn't pay hundreds of billions of dollars for that? Also, Americans who don't lose their health insurance will have the privilege of paying more for the insurance that they are lucky enough to keep. So your health insurance gets more expensive, 32 million Americans lose their health insurance, and the deficit gets worse by about $250 billion. That's what Republicans are pursuing first. Welcome to power. Welcome to control. You know, thanks to the Jason Altmaiers of the world, thanks to the reflexive timidity of conservative Democrats on issues like this, even when health reform passed last year, Democrats were never really able to create any political capital from passing health reform. They were too busy fighting amongst themselves about what the bill should have had in it and whether or not it was a good idea to do it in the first place and what Republicans might say about it passing, as if Republicans would have anything nice to say if it didn't pass. How did we get from that circular firing squad, Democrats attacking each other, Democrats running from their own accomplishments, fractured Democrats on the issue of health reform? How did we get from that to all but 3 Democrats voting to defend it? The Jason Altmaiers of the world standing unified with the Nancy Pelosi's of the world to defend health reform. Democrats have finally achieved unity. They have finally decided health reform was something worth fighting for. Thank you, John Boehner. All it took was Republicans making it their first priority to take an impotent swipe at taking it away.
You campaigned effectively, you beat us good, you ran on the agenda of defeating health care and repealing it. Now you're doing it. Own it. Admit what it is you are doing. This is not a campaign we're playing with fire. We're taking away health care benefits to make a real difference to our families.
There's no commitment to the American people here. The only commitment is to the insurance companies. They're the only ones that are going to gain from repeal of this very important legislation.
The Republicans are going to allow the return of the worst abuses of the health insurance industry. Pre-existing condition exclusions, taking away your policy when you get sick, lifetime and annual caps, throwing your kids off your policies. The Republican repeal of this bill would enable all those things for their very, very generous benefactors in the insurance industry. I haven't had a single constituent, and I know you haven't, begged you to bring back these abuses. Is that what you're doing? Is that what they want?
Not only would House Republicans repealing this bill add $230 billion to the deficit, not only would it take away health insurance from 32 million Americans, not only would it have everybody with health insurance pay more, Repeal would also allow insurance companies to drop you when you get sick and when you need the coverage the most. Repeal would allow insurance companies to deny you coverage because of a pre-existing condition. Repeal would have insurance companies be allowed to impose annual limits on the amount of care you can get. Maybe you hate the whole idea of the dreaded Obamacare, but who hates the idea of these things? These things that are the constituent parts of health reform, no matter what dismissive nickname you want to give health reform. What political party, what politician would want to hang his political future on fighting for insurance companies' right to drop you once you get sick, even though you've been paying your premiums all along? Insurance companies can't do that anymore because of health reform. So naturally, Republicans want to repeal it. The Republicans' first act, now that they control the House, is to do everything they can to make sure insurance companies are allowed to drop you when you get sick. Even conservative blue dog Democrats are not stupid enough to go along with this. Just because it's something that you plan to do in advance doesn't mean it's not a blunder. Republicans have made a blunder here. They have blundered into finally forcing Democrats to reap the political capital they should have reaped in the first place from passing health reform. Republicans have unified the Democrats on health reform. They have persuaded Democrats to preach to the country about how important the reforms are that they got passed. And they have invited, on the floor of the legislature that they control, a campaign-ready, what are you doing to the American people defense of health reform as an achievement to be proud of and an achievement to defend. I hesitate to believe that Democrats could have achieved this alone, but with John Boehner in charge, anything is possible.